Greetings, gentle viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Here I am at Cleopatra's Needle in London. And there you can see how high up it goes. So this was built around 1500 BC in Egypt by Thothmes. He was the pharaoh at the time. And it's got all sorts of hieroglyphs carved onto it, as in sacred carvings. That's what it means in Greek. So the ancient Egyptians, they had 3 alphabets. And this is the most ornate one. It's take the longest to draw. And they had the other one, which is sort of middling, and they had a more demotic one, which is sound-based, not ideograms. And so for religious inscriptions, they usually use hieroglyphs. Anyway, so it was moved from Thothmes, from its original site, to near Alexandria. And it's got different lots of hieroglyphs. The original ones, some other ones were added by another pharaoh centuries later. And then there was scrubbed out in the Greek era because maybe here looking up you can see some of the hieroglyphs. I tell you what, I'll make it darker, then they'll stand out a bit more. No, make it darker like that. Then Alexander the Great, he conquered Egypt, and when he died, one of his generals stayed behind and found the Ptolemy dynasty, and they became Egyptianized. And Cleopatra was part of them. The pharaohs under that dynasty, they deliberately practiced incest, as in the sister would marry the brother, so that the children would be fully of the blood royal. Now, why do we all recoil at the very suggestion of incest? Well, we resile from the very idea. It's repugnant to us because the chance of your children having very serious congenital disabilities are much higher than if you have an exogamous relationship. So consanguinity is bad news, that degree of consanguinity. Anyway, so it was put up again in 12 BC, the time of Augustus Caesar. What else should I point out? Yeah, in the Greek era, some of the hieroglyphs were deliberately effaced, not completely effaced. I'm not quite sure why, what they thought was wrong with it. Anyway, so it's got a most fascinating provenance, this piece. It eventually collapsed in the sands near Alexandria. Alexandria having been the capital of Egypt for some time. You know, it had that famous lighthouse, an enormous library that was burnt down at the time of Cleopatra. The famous Cleopatra that we know is Cleopatra VII, in fact. The one who was the girlfriend of Julius Caesar, gave birth to his son Caesarion. Then Caesar Augustus, that's Julius Caesar's great nephew, previously known as Octavian. Augustus, he had Caesarion killed. Augustus was always saying, oh yes, I feel such reverence for my divine great uncle Julius Caesar. And the Romans really did believe he became a god. They could deify these leaders. And to show just how much he respected his great uncle, he murdered his great uncle's son, Caesarion, because Augustus didn't want anyone else claiming to be emperor instead. Anyway, then the Napoleonic Wars came along. So 1798, Napoleon fatefully decided to set sail for Egypt and not Ireland. Had he sailed to Ireland, history might have been very different. But anyway, he got mired in the sands there, or in the quicksands as it were, metaphorically speaking. Yes, he won some battles, he ruled Egypt, certainly. He was ruling Lower Egypt, invaded into Palestine and Israel, carried out a large-scale massacre of some Ottoman prisoners there, but plague broke out amongst his men. He visited some of his soldiers in the plague hospital, one of the really valiant things he did. He'd won the Battle of the Pyramids earlier on. It's actually not in sight of the pyramids, but he supposedly said, soldiers, 40 centuries look down upon you, as in they were built 4,000 years earlier, the pyramids. In fact, he didn't say that in the original because he rewrote accounts of the battles numerous times, and Napoleon had many fantastic gifts, but he was not an orator, and his French wasn't even grammatical. So he didn't like speaking in public. Anyway, so Napoleon eventually realized he was losing. There was the Battle of the Nile, Battle of Abu Qubay, as they sometimes call it, when most of the French fleet was sunk off the northern coast of Egypt by Horatio Nelson. And so Napoleon, he escaped to France, one of the few French ships still afloat there, and he just abandoned his army, obviously completely disgraceful, not what a general's supposed to do. Went back to France to help to take over, be part of the Directory, be one of the consuls then. But anyway, the French were defeated, and Egypt was part of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was a British ally at the time, so there's a large Middle Eastern Muslim empire. And the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire lived in Istanbul. We then used to call it Constantinople. And he was grateful to the United Kingdom for its help, and but Egypt was ruled by a governor on his behalf. It was Muhammad Ali at the time, who was an Albanian adventurer, because Albania was part of the Ottoman Empire back then, mostly Sunni Muslim, and the Egyptomania started. Perhaps one of the few lasting legacies of Napoleon is that there had been some curiosity about ancient Egypt in the Western world prior to that, but it really became a craze after Napoleon. He brought Champollion with him, who'd cracked the Rosetta Stone. Now, a lot of the spade work for that had been done by a Swedish scholar who'd already deciphered some of the words. I can't remember the Swede's name, and indeed a British doctor, but his name escapes me at the moment. But anyway, there was also an Italian circus strongman who was there, and he started digging up some of these artifacts. But anyway, the British said, well, could we have this collapsed obelisk? And Muhammad Ali just perceived it as old junk. You want a fallen down stone? Fine, take it. Plus, it was a reminder of the pre-Islamic past. And some of the Sunni Muslims didn't like to be reminded that, they hadn't always believed in Islam in Egypt. They believed Christianity. Still about 10% of Egyptians are Christians, but they believed in a pre-Mosaic religion beforehand, the polytheistic one. So fine, take it, it's junk. And it's put in an iron cylinder and shipped towards the United Kingdom. And in the Bay of Biscay, they hit a tempest and they had to get rid of some of their ballast, and it was dropped into the Bay of Biscay. I don't know how they managed to recover it some years later, lift it off the floor of the ocean and bring it back here, and then lift it up like that. Now, obviously, the plaques here with some of the information are not original, nor indeed is the steel structures here with the wing emblem and various other things. The strange Egyptian crowns, the lotus leaf, the beetle symbol, nor indeed are these two huge sphinxes. There's like a lion with the face of a woman, but a bit like the sphinx from what's it called? Oedipus Rex. And you see that serpent symbol in the headdress. Down here is the Ankh, like the symbol of life. Do you see, bottom left? A bit like the cross. And on the other one, I bothered to show you the other sphinx in some details, the same thing. And they are larger than life. Like if I was to stand up there, the face would be taller than me, the top of the head would be taller than me. So the governor of Egypt, Muhammad Ali, he gave it to the British out of his appreciation for their efforts against Napoleon. Of course, the British scarcely needed any encouragement because they very much wanted to defeat France. So that was that, because Admiral Lord Nelson had crucially defeated the French fleets there, the mouths of the River Nile, and then General Abercrombie had led his troops against the French, the remaining bit of the French army. So that is that Cleopatra's Needle. There's one in Paris as well, on Place de la Révolution, quite close to where King Louis XVI was executed. I have a feeling there's one in Washington, D.C., but I think that one's a dummy, like not an original, just a copy, but I could be wrong. So it stands right beside the River Nile, not the River Nile, right beside the River Thames. You can get cruise boats here. So that's enough from the Thames embankment about Cleopatra's Needle, as it's commonly called.